Hey everybody, and welcome to Don't Copy That Floppy, your weekly video game news podcast, broadcasting live Fridays 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time on twitch.tv/DCTF podcast. I'm your host, Lex, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Booge.
It is Friday, September 21st, and by golly, we've got all sorts of news to talk about today, such as a fun little update on Nintendo Online. Mr. Nathaniel J. Spoderman breaks records.
Yay.
PlayStation gets an emulator. All of Europe have come out against loot boxes, more at 9.
Yes.
Also, apparently loot boxes are real bad for you. Australians told us so.
Yep. And you always trust Australians.
Known sexist and KKK member Tyler Ninja Blevins back in the news.
KKK Grand Dragon and Twitch streamer Tyler Ninja Blevins.
David Duke's favorite son.
Proud son of the North.
I can't stress enough, that is just a joke. Tyler Ninja Blevins is actually probably a lovely person.
Maybe.
Capcom shutters one of its studios. Another studio also closes down. A legendary composer hangs up his keyboard. I don't know exactly what you would use for that. And China really doesn't like Twitch. And after that, we're going to be talking about games that just came out and games that are about to come out. But let's start it all off with a fun little goofy little update to Nintendo Online. We talked about it all last week and how stupid it was. Fun times, everybody. The Switch NES emulator, part of the Nintendo Switch Online package, has already been hacked.
Already. Didn't take long.
Less than a week, everyone. Less than a week. So, this is, I'm sorry. It's barely been live a day. My mistake.
Oh, yeah.
According to a modder who goes by the name of Cappuccino Heck, which I love. I just love it.
It's a great name.
It's pretty easy to load your own ROMs into a hacked Switch and play them directly through the NES emulator, which comes as part of the $20 a year Nintendo Online service. So he tweeted about it, saying such things as, "Good Lord, hashtag Nintendo Switch Online's NES games are plain .NES files. GUI appears to be entirely LUA." I don't know what that is. Much like the SNES Classic, so people are gonna be able to go to town on this. The database file that contains a listing of all valid games is plain text.
That's so amazing.
He even has the screenshot of the plain text file, and I'm like, oh my god, it is. It's so good.
Yeah. I love that it's like, there's no, I don't know, like, it's so plainly just an emulator. Like, there's no gussying it up. It's the same as like NES 9X or something,
yep.
Or Nesticle. It's just in a better package.
He posted a video on Twitch showing his loadout of all of his NES games, selecting ones that are not part of the 20 that you're supposed to have access to. Mm-hmm. And he says, okay, so this is incredibly basic, but it shows that fully custom games are possible. Hackchi? Yeah, Hackchi for NES. Nintendo Switch Online when? Question mark? I don't know what that means, but
I don't even.
Yeah, I guess it just talks about how this is it's this same emulator that they have running on their little NES and SNES classic boxes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a super basic emulator, and like when people hacked those, it was less of a big deal because that's like a piece of tech that comes preloaded with stuff. It doesn't connect to the internet. So once you have it, once you own it, like you can hack it, take it apart, add ROMs to it. There doesn't seem to be anything inherently bad about that.
No.
I mean, I'm sure Nintendo doesn't want you to, but we don't care what they think. Because once you've bought it, it's yours.
Nintendo doesn't want you to do a lot of things. Yeah. They're like your parents.
So, but Nintendo Switch Online, like, the fact that they're using the same tech and it's not under any kind of additional firewalls or being monitored or anything. I mean, maybe there is a check that they will do on them periodically. And I'm sure that, like, as we know with hacked switches, it will often be like, oh, my switch is hacked. And then if I ever try to dial out to Nintendo servers, they might figure that out. And if they do, it could brick your account and stuff like that.
Right.
So this inherently uses the internet feature because it's hacking Nintendo Switch Online. So you're playing with even more fire than usual if this is what you're trying to do. You are already also need a hacked Switch to do this, which is an important side note in all of this.
You're playing with fire for games that are in some cases over 30 years old, and you can get for free in so many other places.
Yes. So it's just crazy to me that it was that easy for people to do it, and that Nintendo didn't. They just used super basic emulators and ROM files. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but
It's just it's funny, like the online ineptitude, the internet ineptitude of Nintendo seems to go both ways, where the functionality doesn't work and they can't protect themselves. So it just keeps going. They should really hire someone who knows what the internet is and how it works.
That'd be a good idea.
Yeah,
never gonna do that, but
no.
It's
come on, Reggie.
Yeah, Jesus, Reggie. So. That's fun.
That's fun.
Let's move from Nintendo over to Sony.
And they're killing it, unlike Nintendo with their emulators. I'm just kidding. Nintendo's making tons of money, too. Marvel, this is from USA Today, so you know it's some real news. Marvel's Spider-Man for PlayStation 4 swings to a record-breaking opening. That's great. Spider-Man Mania is back. So I have questions about this sentence. When was Spider-Man Mania around in the first place? Was that ever a thing?
I don't think that was ever a thing. I
mean, he's always kind of been like, he's semi-popular, but I don't think he's ever been like, the Beatles. So anyways, the popular comic book superhero's recent resurgence has expanded beyond cinemas and into the world of video games, with the Wall Crawler's latest self-titled game selling a record 3.3 million copies in the first 3 days of its release this month. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty much unheard of. While Sony did not provide an official number, with a retail price of $60 for the game, the 3.3 million copies translates to roughly $198 million, crushing the $117 million opening weekend box office for the latest solo Spider-Man film, Spider-Man Homecoming. That shit's crazy.
Okay, but this is another thing where you can tell that this is written by USA Today and not like someone who actually writes about video game stuff, because that's really comparing apples to oranges when you're trying to do that. It doesn't really make sense to compare those two things.
It doesn't. Yeah, they're very different markets and marketplaces. But it's still pretty crazy that it's sold more than one of the Marvel films. Is it a Marvel film? Yeah, it's a Marvel film.
It's a Marvel-Sony joint production.
Right, it's the Spike Lee joint. 1 million copies were pre-ordered, another record for Sony. While Sony includes the sale of its $400 Spider-Man PlayStation 4 Pro bundle as part of its 3.3 million total copies of the game, it did not break out how many of the limited edition consoles were sold. The bundle's more expensive price could push the $198 million figure even higher. The number of copies sold set a record for Sony, making makers of the PlayStation 4 and publisher behind the game as the fastest-selling first-party video game released in the company's history. Spider-Man takes that title from the latest release of the popular video game franchise God of War, which sold more than 3.1 million copies in the first 3 days in May. And then it goes on to some Sony execs saying, "Oh yeah, we had high expectations, but we hit it out of the park." This is wild. I know people like Spider-Man, but I didn't think they'd like it that much.
Well, especially, so this mentions Data Boy, and it's really important not just to compare those numbers, but to compare the timeline. Because Data Boy came out fairly recently by comparison. It was this year. It was just in May. So the fact that Sony had two exclusives within this short a time frame of each other that both sold like gangbusters, and that I will point out to all you terrible game industry people out there who definitely don't listen to the show, Both those games are not live services. They're both
Correct.
single-player, story-driven narrative games. The kind of games
Correct.
that were announced dead years ago by the game industry.
Does Spider-Man even have loot boxes?
It has unlockable costumes. Do you have
Oh
to
my
pay
God.
for them via microtransactions, via MTXs?
No, no. I mean, it's just shows Sony's prowess in the first-party development side of things. They've always been ahead of the game there. Everyone else has tried to catch up. Besides, like I guess Nintendo, just with their in-house development. Yeah, and they got great developers. I mean, and they're like, yeah, you have Dad of Boy, Spooderman, and then soon after we're gonna have, well, not soon after, but at some point we're gonna have The Last of Us 2, which is gonna kill it again. We're gonna
And a
have
while back, towards the beginning, admittedly, towards the beginning of the PlayStation 4's life cycle, we had Horizon Zero Dawn.
yeah, which is it did huge for them. Especially, that's another thing. That was a single player, or I think there was multiplayer in that, but it was not a online only loot boxy kind of shit game. Single player focused game, and a new IP, which everyone says don't sell at all. So that was another thing that Sony just put the big middle finger in front of everyone and made a bunch of money. And then eventually we're going to get the Kojima game sometime, maybe in our lifetimes, though maybe not.
Maybe not.
Then the next 20 to 30 years we'll get Death Stranding, and that game I think is going to break all kinds of records for units sold because of the background it has. So yeah, the long and short of it is we know what Insomniac is going to be doing for the next 10 years, and that's making more Spider-Man games.
And good for Insomniac, because I've always really been fond of that company, but they've always felt like they were very much like a second tier company that had some interesting franchises, but they never really hit it big.
Right.
And now that they did a Spoderman, everybody loves them, and they're trying making all the money, and I'm very happy for them because I would like to see this translate into them doing another original IP.
Yes. Yeah, because they did. They made Spyro back in the day, and then they made Ratchet and Clank, and then they made the Resistance games, with 3 of those, I think. And then they made Sunset Overdrive, which kind of flopped. Also wasn't exclusive. Yeah, now they got that Spoderman, which I'm sure that makes Marvel very happy as well, and probably, cozies up a little closer to them, maybe give them more properties to work with. Or give just more properties out in general, because I think, like, the crazy thing is that even though these Marvel movies are making all the money in the world, and they're the only movies that are being made at all. That and Star Wars. Like superhero games, Marvel games don't have a great history overall.
No, they're very hit or miss. There are certainly gems in there, but considering how much of them have been made, there's a lot of just stinkers in that pile.
Yeah, big old stinkers. And Spider-Man has a history of being some of the better ones. Back in like the PS2 era. But like recently, in recent memory, you had like the Arkham games and now this. And like that's it. So maybe this will show that if you trust a big company that knows what they're doing and pair up the right franchise with the right studio, that it can turn out to be a damn good game that sells lots and lots of copies.
Very good. Very good. Success, well deserved. Now, let's move over to, even though PlayStation is making money hand over fist with Spoderman, they just gotta milk everyone for as much money as they're worth. So guess what they're coming out with?
I'll take the most on the nose move that a company can make for 500, please.
They're making a mini retro console. I'm sorry, what is a mini retro console, Mr. Trebek?
That's right.
So yeah, PlayStation Classic, the PS1. They are making a little baby PS1 that runs the PS1 emulator and has PS1 ROMs and has little controller ports with, I don't know how short those cords are going to be, but
really short. They're going to be real tiny.
Oh yeah, no, I can see the picture. They're very short. It's quite short.
Well, it's in the shadow, see, because I don't want to admit that it's short. They're trying to hide it. I have to admit this thing is adorable. This little tiny PS1. But this is the most like lazy cash grab fucking shit I've ever seen. It's just like they're like, oh yeah, Nintendo did that. Let's do that exactly. Let's exactly do what they did.
I wonder
I
if they
can't
even
blame them.
shrunk the console by the same like size percentage. That would be great.
Probably, probably that's probably the same like plastics manufacturer. Um, yeah, so it's coming out. Ooh, excuse me. For Christmas this year, it's going to be out on December 3rd. 24 years after the release of the original PlayStation. It's going to have an HDMI cable and a USB cable, and like other mini consoles listed, there is not going to be an AC adapter. I don't know why that's a thing that they all do. Also, kind of strange is that it's going to come with a classic PlayStation controller and not a DualShock. So I find that kind of strange.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's going to be, I think they said 20 games or over 20. 20 games are going to be on the console, but they haven't announced all of them. But so far, they have announced Final Fantasy VII, of course, Jumping Flash, Ridge Racer Type 4, Tekken 3, and Wild Arms. All fantastic games. That's definitely in the nostalgia range for me, from games from the 90s. Yeah, and it's going to be a mini console that's featuring gaming's most hideous era of graphics.
Back at the very beginning of 3D graphics, when everything was all the fighting polygon team all the way.
Yeah, there's lots of Z fighting going on, lots of jagged, like just horrible angled looking people.
I think that Dan and I were recording a bunch of bonus content, which you can check out if you become a patron.
Oh my god!
We recorded a bunch of bonus content, and we just did one that was a retrospective on the Switch because we both bought our Switches like kind of around the same time, which was a few months after its release. So we've had them for around the same amount of time. And we were thinking about like how the game library looked, stuff like that. So we sort of discussed that in detail. But one of the things we were talking about was the upcoming Smash game, and I was like, man. The new Smash game better have the fighting polygon team in it.
Yeah.
So,
it better.
So yeah, what's actually the most interesting thing about this to me is when Nintendo did it, they did NES and SNES, that are both consoles that made 2D games because like 3D graphics weren't a thing yet. I mean, they kind of were in the SNES, sort of.
You had the Mode 7 for Star Fox.
Yeah.
Things look all
kind of
3D, but yeah, it was half 3D.
Yeah, so the fact that someone is giving us a classic console that was in the first generation of 3D consoles, I think is better. I don't know, it's cooler that we're seeing an emulator that's running 3D games rather than just 2D games. And I kind of appreciate that.
Yeah, I wonder if they just straight up took PSX 9X and just slapped it in a ROM box.
Are they as dumb as Nintendo? Perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, it is interesting. I think it's funny. Like I jest. I say that it is the most horrendous. It's the awkward puberty of video games around that time when 3D was new and everything was ugly. But I think it's great that aesthetic is now becoming like a retro thing. Like games are coming out with that kind of aesthetic instead of like the pixel aesthetic. And I find it nostalgic because I'm like, oh, I'm old, and that shit is starting to be nostalgic for me as it came out 24 years ago. So yeah, this thing will make a ton of money, I think. I don't know if it'll make as much as the Nintendo Minis, but
yeah, it's tough to say because the Nintendo ones are, I think, more tied to nostalgia because it's a slightly older demographic. And the Nintendo brand, because like when you think of the PS1, you think of a lot of the games on it, but you think of stuff like FF7.
yes.
You don't think of, but when you think of the NES, you think of the first party titles that they put on it, like
you think of Mario, Zelda,
and that's the big advantage Nintendo will always have going for it, is it just has those really strong first party titles that are very closely associated with the hardware.
Yes.
Whereas Sony doesn't really have that.
They don't. You have some millennials out there that pine for Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, but they never had the same, level that Nintendo did. And it's interesting, because like we are just talking about, Sony kills it with their first party stuff, but they don't really have mascotable IP. They just make like adult serious shit, so it is interesting, but man, I love the look of that console. It's so 90s. It's great. those round buttons.
Those big round buttons.
Yeah, it's good. It's a great time. Great time. Every time. One thing that Sony has over Nintendo and always will is its startup sounds are way better than Nintendo or Microsoft.
I will never forget the startup sound of the Sega Genesis.
Oh God.
Man, that was always my favorite.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's a good one.
So, moving on, let's talk about loot boxes. Don't you love talking about loot boxes, Chris?
God, kill me.
Is it
Kill
your
me now.
favorite topic? So, loot boxes, we talk about them all the time, but they are actually legitimately in the news this week. Because we have 15 European, and actually 14 European and 1 American, gambling regulators unite to tackle the loot box threat. Loot blocks. Along with Washington State. So yeah, maybe it is 16 and then also Washington State. But this is really interesting because it comes right on the heels of the whole Belgium versus FIFA and EA deal that's going on, where that criminal investigation has been launched. It was less than a week after that happened. We have 15 gambling regulators from Europe and 1 from the US that have together announced they will address the risks created by the blurring of lines between gaming and gambling. So the collaborative effort organized at the 2018 Gambling Regulators European Forum includes signatories from the UK, France, Ireland, Spain, and Washington State.
Oh my God.
So they want to, they want to be tackling unlicensed third-party websites offering illegal gambling linked to popular video games. So this is interesting, and it's a different angle than what we're seeing with EA and Belgium right now, and a lot of the lead up to this. Instead, this is what we were seeing like a year ago with the CSGO gambling website stuff.
Yeah, when they were betting skins.
Yes.
And scamming people out of some cash.
Gotta have that tie-dye knife grip.
Yeah.
If you don't, why even bother playing? You're not a pro CSGOer.
I know. It's really, it's pathetic.
It's pathetic. So yeah, this is them looking at that, and I think that primarily. And I think that that's good, better maybe than what they could be doing, because that is such a clear-cut case of gambling, because these sites are they're obviously gambling. And they're not going directly after game companies. They're going off of after these ancillary sort of places that exist symbiotically with the games that they're gambling, they're using to gamble. So
necrotically off of the games. Yeah, it's I think this is a more righteous way to go about doing this, because if you go after the companies, they do the stupid thing. Like, they actually mentioned this in this article, I think, at one point, where, or maybe it's the other article, where Blizzard joined EA in saying, "Oh, we don't agree with the way your laws are made, so we don't think that our loot boxes are gambling, so fuck you." This is like going after like obviously illegal and manipulative sites and stuff like that. So yeah, good for them, I think.
Now, it should be noted that they are apparently considering going after loot boxes as well. Specifically sort of different features of them. That's just not their primary focus.
Right. Yeah, you got to start somewhere.
So overall, we are seeing a big shift in lawmakers going after these kind of practices in games. And I think the next story we're going to talk about sort of is starting to solidify the fact that I think after this commission finishes with third-party sites, they're going to start going after loot boxes, especially if the story we're going to talk about after is supported by more similar studies.
Yeah. This is can the good guys overthrow capitalism? The answer, probably not.
Probably not. So
we're going to try.
In Australia, the land down under, they
took
a break
the
from
toilets that go backwards.
Yeah, they took a break from eating Vegemite for just a few minutes and decided to conduct a study of players and video games and microtransactions and loot boxes.
And
So,
boxing kangaroos.
and then kangaroos were probably some of the people surveyed. Of the 7,000 players surveyed, I'm sure like 2 to 3,000 were actually kangaroos.
Yeah, listen, my uncle was a kangaroo who had gambling problems, so this is very serious to me.
So the 7,000 players were surveyed. The outcome of a study revealed in an Australian Senate public hearing by Dr. David Zendel and Dr. Paul Carnes. They sound so serious.
Yeah.
So among
Paul
the
Collins,
players,
mate.
yeah, I'm sure once if I heard them talk, I wouldn't find them serious at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, among the players surveyed, those who suffer from a gambling addiction were found to be more likely to spend money on loot boxes, which the study says means that loot boxes in games have the same psychological motivations found in traditional gambling. So, this article is only sort of a brief overview. I haven't actually read the study, but just from what I'm seeing in this article, that does feel a little bit like they're making a leap there.
Yeah.
They're saying like, hey, these people have signs of gambling addiction. Okay, did they get loot boxes more? Yes. Well, I guess that settles it. Loot boxes are gambling.
Right, yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. I think there's probably more to the study than that. I should give
I'm sure.
Dr. Zendel and Dr. Carnes more credit. But they have some quotes here. So let's see here. Spending large amounts of money on loot boxes was associated with problematic levels of spending on other forms of gambling. This is what one would expect if loot boxes psychologically constituted a form of gambling. It is not that one would expect. It's not what one would expect if loot boxes were instead psychologically comparable to baseball cards, which is something that the baseball card sort of comparison is a comparison that a lot of gaming companies like EA have made to their loot boxes, saying, "Oh no, it's not like gambling; it's just like baseball cards, and they're not
It's collecting.
addictive. Yeah, it's fine." But yeah, this study is saying to the contrary. No, these tap into the same sort of I don't want to say sections of the brain, but like sort of habits of people,
Impulses.
Yeah, impulses of people who suffer from gambling addiction. So they're, even if they're not intended to, they certainly exploit those people who are vulnerable to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, of course, that's what the case is. You know, like it makes total sense that that's the truth. I think that ultimately, and I know that like with any kind of scientific field and any kind of scientific study, you have to work off of like the empirical evidence that already exists for other things. But unfortunately, I think when we're thinking about loot boxes, we have to kind of think of it as its own thing a little bit, because it is sort of somewhere in between gambling and baseball cards, right? Or, you know, any kind of collector's habit. And I don't really think it's apt to say it's exactly like playing a slot machine or it's exactly like collecting baseball cards. It's like it's kind of a hybrid of the two that's new and should probably be explored in its own right.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, you know, it's so new and it's so fresh and it's making so many waves so quickly that I think we just haven't had the time to get mountains of empirical evidence from people in the long term using loot boxes the way that we do for gambling or collecting. Yeah, so I think it'll be a while before we actually have some more enlightened perspectives about loot boxes.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, I agree with you that they're probably not as bad as sitting in front of a slot machine.
Yeah,
because there's not that obvious, like, you could make money doing this, so you should keep pulling that lever because it could mean that you're getting money. It's much, much subtler than that. So
totally.
I think, yeah, they should be, in my opinion, they should be regulated more than they are, but they might not need to be regulated to the level of a traditional gambling type thing. And that's fine.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that people are looking into it, and I'm glad that these studies are being conducted. And yeah, like you said, there should be more of them. And I think when there are more of them and the evidence sort of fleshes out a bit, and gets a little more overwhelming, that's when people's minds are going to finally start changing. Actually, this is sort of a weird comparison, but in terms of video games, you could easily compare it to the 90s when everyone was saying, well, video games cause violence. Obviously,
Right,
they cause violence. And then people said, oh, well, we just did a study saying they don't. And then people were like, I don't know, they might still cause violence. And then 50 million more studies were done that said that they didn't. And now it's widely accepted, with the exception of a few crotchety politicians.
Right.
And some very, very, I don't know, uppity suburban moms.
Conservative mothers.
Yes, that video games do not cause violent behavior or violent thoughts.
No. Any more than movies do.
Yeah, so it seems that loot boxes are probably going to be on that same trajectory where right now everyone's saying, no, they're perfectly fine. What could possibly be wrong with them?
What could possibly go wrong?
And now people are starting to say, oh, well, actually, they're kind of gambling. And now a few people are saying, oh, maybe they are gambling, those 15 European countries and Washington State.
Again, Washington State. You gotta love it. Seattle.
Good for you guys.
Home of Magic the Gathering, who makes trading cards that cost a lot of money.
There's nothing addictive about packs of Magic cards.
No, God, no. Just one more and I'll get the Black Lotus. No, yeah, this is, I can see, it's exactly like you said with, like, the 90s and the video game violence thing, when everyone thought that Night Trap was going to, kill our youths. But we're just going to have to wait, 15 or 20 years, and then eventually we'll have, like, some more concrete evidence on this, and we'll still have the crotchety politicians and conservative moms that still think it's one way or the other. But I can see in the near future it's just having, along with the, like, an ESRB rating, having a how much loot boxes are in this game rating on the box. I can see something like that being implemented, maybe by the ESRB themselves. Maybe the forced to, or maybe just in Washington. So we'll see. The long and storied tale of loot boxes continues. I do love that this took place in somewhere other than the United States because of this quote. Quote, industry statements typically disassociate loot boxes from gambling. They instead highlight similarities between loot boxes and harmless products like trading cards or Kinder Surprise eggs. But I had to look that up because I don't know what the fuck Kinder Surprise eggs were.
Okay.
It turns out they're eggs that have little toys in them.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I assumed they were, but it tickles me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about a man that needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. Tyler Ninja Blevins. Okay, that wasn't really an introduction, but let's talk about him.
Let's talk about him. So, Mr. Blevins, we've talked about in the past, of course, world-renowned KKK Grand Dragon and noted misogynist.
And anti-woman, horrible garbage filth.
Right, exactly. And a bad rapper, too. So, he is going to become the first ever gamer to appear on the ESPN magazine cover. This is from Fortune. In a sign of the ascendance of esports in the world of professional sports, Fortnite star Ninja will become the first professional gamer to appear on the cover of the ESPN The Magazine. Ninja, whose real name is Tyler Blevins, is the first crossover star in the gaming world with more than 11 million followers on Twitch, Amazon's live gaming platform, and 18 million subscribers on YouTube, Google's live gaming platform. His net worth has reportedly reached $6 million, with the gamer's monthly earnings reaching $500,000 in March. Ninja told ESPN it is now nearly a seven-figure number. Much of Ninja's earnings, and fuck him for that, that's so much money. So much of Ninja's earnings come from his online gaming, but more is starting to come from traditional channels. Ninja signed a marketing partnership with Red Bull in June. Quote, when we decide whether, I'm going to do a voice, when we decide whether I'm going to do an event, the pay has to be there, Ninja told ESPN. If it's not paid, how much clout are you going to get? Are you going to be networking? Is that networking worth 70 grand? The more breaks streamers take, the less they stream, the less they're relevant. Sorry.
Surprisingly accurate.
Yeah. ESPN and Ninja announced the magazine news on Twitter. Ninja will be profiled in the October 1st issue of the magazine, which will appear on newsstands this week. A digital version But the profile is already available online with a great looking cover, nice colors and composition.
I think it matches his hair really well.
Yep.
But no, so we have our fun making fun of Ninja, but really I think this is great.
Yeah.
And I've got nothing against Ninja except for the
No.
fact that I think he's kind of a coward, but we've discussed that in past episodes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that it's really great that he's on the cover of ESPN because it's just more of the proliferation of video games as a mainstream consumption media and esports as a mainstream thing. So it's kind of like video games were recognized as being a big thing, I think, a long time ago when they started making megabucks.
Megabucks?
Yeah, megabucks, yeah. I
don't know what that is.
That's actually an amount of money. I don't know if you knew.
Oh,
but
I didn't.
It's not just a figure of speech that I made up. It's definitely a real amount of money. So
megabucks.
So when they started doing that, they were recognized as a real thing. But this idea that people that people like to watch them and like to watch them in the same or greater numbers than the people who are watching traditional television or traditional sports. I think that concept is taking a while for the mainstream to sort of get with the program on. And to be fair, I guess it's kind of a new phenomenon, but it's proving that it's not just a craze, that people really are just interested in consuming this media in the same kind of fashion, and that people like Ninja are effectively just the modern equivalent of a sportscaster or a talk show host. Pretty much.
Yep. More or less. They're just on more often. It's no different than, The Tonight Show. People watch Johnny Carson for decades, for generations. Not because they wanted to see who was hosting that night or who was guesting that night. They just like spending time with Johnny Carson. It was a thing that they liked to do before they went to bed. It's no different than that, I think. People just like Mr. Ninja and like hanging out with him while he plays Fortnite. It surprises me that he's the one, this like Twinkie dweeb who plays Fortnite, and Fortnite's the game that made the breakthrough. Like that combination is not one that I would have ever called. It's odd. It's an odd world we live in 2018. And yeah, I mean, he definitely got his breakthrough when he played with Drake. I think that brought in a huge swath of people who had probably didn't watch Twitch or didn't really know much about Fortnite. They're like, oh, Drake's playing it with someone, and then that just onboarded a ton of mainstream people. In the last paragraph, they do talk about they talk a little bit about Fortnite, how it's generated more than $1 billion in revenue from in-app purchases, while becoming a reason for at least 200 divorces because of its addicted allure.
I read something about that. I didn't include it in the articles because it just sounded too stupid. But yeah, apparently, like people are getting divorced over Fortnite.
Yeah, I mean, not Ninja though, because he refuses to look at women because it could end up in problems with his wife.
I'm hoping we don't find anything else bad about Ninja, because I'm really just like, he was. At first I thought, oh, he's a perfect ambassador for the gaming community. Fantastic. Really good. And then we found out about the streaming with women thing. And I'm like, okay, he's not a great ambassador for the community, but I will still take him over many of the other people who could be ambassadors. I'll still take him over PewDiePie in a heartbeat.
Yes. Yeah, he's not JonTron yet.
Yeah. So so now I'm just like, okay, this is okay, and then I'm sure another bad news story about him will come out in a couple months, and I'll be like, God damn it.
Tyler eats children in his basement Blevins.
So we're gonna find out.
Yeah. No, but he's a lovely man. I'm sure he's nice and a faithful husband.
Okay, so
I don't mind making fun of him because the dude makes like millions of dollars a month on Twitch.
That's the other thing. Man, he makes such an ungodly amount of money. If you want to talk about the anti-capitalist in me, whenever I look at someone making that much money, I'm just like, that just shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be allowed to make that much money. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care if you're working 24/7. That's more money than you could possibly need. You shouldn't be able to make that much.
I know. And to be fair, like I think it was Shroud who was also who's also a popular Twitch streamer, talked about like how I read a thing about how he's saying like he said he doesn't think anyone's going to be able to top Ninja in terms of like subscribers or the amount of money he makes on Twitch and stuff. And he said straight up, it's like because the dude works all the time, like and works really hard and he's really good at it. And so yeah, it's not like he's just getting a free pass. He works really hard for this, but it's still a lot of money to mostly play Fortnite, no matter how you shake it.
All right, so we got a handful of more stories. We're going to have to try and get through them as quickly as possible. I mean, I knew we had a lot of stories today, so it was going to be tough. But turns out Capcom's having a bad time with its studio in Vancouver, which was intended to make games for Western audiences. This is the studio that was making, primarily known for the Dead Rising games, which were games that never really managed to take off. I'm actually kind of unsure of why there were so many of them.
Yeah, I think they had their core fan base. I think they were more, like the first two, I think were more important at the time because it was on the 360 and it showcased like a lot of just the amount of zombies that they could have on screen was really impressive at the time. But yeah, I think like the later ones, a lot of people are like, all right, I don't care. Really.
So Capcom shutters Dead Rising studio Capcom Vancouver. The subsidiary has been shuttered and its projects have been canceled. So this is too bad because you never want to see a studio be shuttered or all those people gotta work. That's always bad news. But Capcom...
Well, they also made Puzzle Fighter, which I know a lot of people like.
Oh, really? I've never heard of that, but it's a mobile game, so that's probably why. The studio, which is best known for Dead Rising series and the short-lived Puzzle Fighter mobile game, has ceased operations effective September 18th. Its current projects have been canceled. Capcom is currently reviewing the allocation of its development resources that support the production of world-class content. Blah, 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 public statement.
Yeah, word salad.
Yeah, it's too bad. The writing had kind of been on the wall for Capcom Vancouver. I don't know if we talked about it. I think we might have. But back in February, apparently they were hit by a wave of layoffs, approximately 30% of their workforce. And then in April, they stopped supporting Puzzle Fighter. So that was a big, bad, terrible omen for them. And I guess people kind of saw it coming because of that. I sort of saw it coming because of that. But it's still sad because you don't want those people to be out of a job. And it's not like they did bad work. I mean, the Dead Rising games, I never really got into them. And I said, I'm not sure why they kept being made because they sort of weren't that interesting. But they were still competently made games and they had some interesting ideas in them. I liked that they were being made.
Yeah. And I think it was cool that a Western studio was given the Capcom brands to work with too. I always thought that they should have Capcom Vancouver should have done a Western RPG open world Mega Man game. I thought that would have been cool.
Yeah.
But it was not meant to be. Capcom's bringing it home to Japan and not letting anything else. So yeah, hopefully the workers there can find some other opportunities. I know Canada has a lot of great game developing, so hopefully they can land on their feet quickly.
Yeah.
Go work at BioWare. BioWare's in Vancouver.
Another studio that's writing might be on the wall, depending on how Anthem does.
Oh my god.
Yikes.
That's going to be a thing.
Yep. But the bad news doesn't end there. There's also bad news with Telltale.
Yeah, so this is big. This is, I don't know if you've updated this, but this you might want to update it again because they've had a fourth update on this story. This is the most updated and corrected story in the world from US Gamer. Sources: Telltale Games is shutting down. The Wolf Among Us 2 and Stranger Things are canceled, and the last Walking Dead series has also been canceled. As information continues to come out of today, so I'm going to start at update for the newest update. As information continues to come out of today's announcement that Telltale Games is closing, in particular in light of Telltale's statement, there are new revelations at the studio at Telltale. We previously reported that a skeleton crew will remain behind to complete work on The Walking Dead final season. That information was inaccurate. Sources who wish to remain anonymous explain that there is a skeleton crew at Telltale, but they will be working on the Minecraft story mode project for Netflix. Yay. In fact, the Walking Dead team was also laid off today, and The Walking Dead final season will not be completed. This matches with the statement issued by Telltale Games where the company promised to, quote, fulfill the company's obligation to its board and partners. One source saying The Walking Dead final season is set to end after the second episode launches next week. Crazy. So this all comes after, I think it was a couple months ago that they had a huge wave of layoffs. They said they were going to scale back and restructure their entire company. And this happens. And from what I've heard, it was fast. There are people that worked at Telltale reporting on Twitter saying that they were told, and then they were told they had 30 minutes to get out of the building.
Oh, man.
And they didn't get any severance money either. So this seems to have happened like in a flash. So I wonder what it was. I mean, I'm sure it was just like a board of directors meeting, and they're like, okay, yeah, we're done. And probably a bunch of investors left, and they're like, oh fuck, we can't keep the lights on tomorrow. So yeah, what a crazy thing. And what a poetically tragic ending, because you have The Walking Dead, which was the game that launched that studio into the stratosphere, not being able to be completed in its final season because they mismanaged all their properties and their popularity.
So this is the thing, right? Because I want to, not knowing the details of the situation, my first impulse is to place all of the blame on the management of Telltale Games. Mm-hmm. Because they did Walking Dead very, very successful. They then just got all of these licenses for all of these huge properties. Batman, Guardians of the Galaxy, Minecraft, as much as I think it's stupid, is still a giant property.
Yes.
And
Borderlands.
Smaller but also very interesting properties like Fables for their Wolf Among Us game, and still continuing with the Walking Dead stuff. And
they had more stuff too. They got Batman, Stranger Things, Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Game of Thrones. And yeah, Stranger Things, they're going to do that. Yeah, I heard it was pretty bad. But on top of that, you look at a lot of their games, and they're just like the same game with different things plugged into them and different voice acting.
And the same horrible engine that froze and ate saves, and it was never good.
So it's not like they had these amazing like technological feats. These were basically like very simple, like choose your path story games. Like the kind
with some good writing. A lot of them were well written.
Yeah, no, but it's just the fact that you have technologically straightforward, simple games, and that all of your games are like this, and that you're getting all of these good licenses for all of these games and releasing them. And it's not like they were selling poorly, most of them. Yeah. That the fact that they couldn't stay afloat with all of that going in their favor just makes me think those managers were morons. Horrible idiots.
And there was a big expose, like, I don't know, 6 months ago or something. I think it was from The Verge. It was about how, it looked into, this was right after all the layoffs. They looked into it, and there were just reports of really horrible toxic mismanagement at that company. A lot of the higher ups like micromanaged everyone, they're putting unreasonable deadlines on their artists and designers to finish all these games out, because they had a pretty big team. They had hundreds of people, but still they were making like so many games at once that it was like they're always down to the line and always like trying to rush stuff out. So probably was the management, and so goes Telltale Studios. Sayonara, ripping pepperonis.
Ripping pepperonis. It's a sad day.
Yeah, I'm sure that all the people that were really talented at that studio will definitely find work elsewhere.
But the sad news doesn't end there, everyone.
More sad news.
More sad news. Get ready to cry while listening to your favorite Final Fantasy soundtrack.
I know. So this is from Polygon. With burnout in sight, Final Fantasy composer takes indefinite sick leave. So if you don't know, you should know that Nobu Uematsu is a Japanese composer. And he has composed, he's probably, besides Koji Kondo, probably the most prolific video game composer, maybe ever. He did almost all of the soundtracks for the Final Fantasy games up until 13. And he very smartly got out when the getting was time to get out. He also did and I didn't know this until today. He did the theme song for Smash Brothers,
Ooh.
which is a great theme song.
Yeah.
And it totally makes sense that he would do that. So he, one of Square Enix's linchpins, Nobuo Uematsu, longtime composer, blah blah blah. I already said that stuff. He announced that he'll be taking an extended, indefinite break from work. Quote, and he wrote this himself. Quote, from composing new works to holding concerts around the world, my days have been hectic yet fulfilling. Uematsu, age 59, wrote on his personal blog. Quote, the resulting fatigue, however, has finally caught up with me, and I find it mentally and physically difficult to go on at my current pace. The idea is to use the idea is to use at least the rest of 2018. I can't read for shit. To rest and reset so that he can regain his health and stamina. Sounds like he could use one of those Final Fantasy inns. Wah, wah, wah. Bad writing. Whether he needs to take additional time off in 2019 is up in the air. For Uematsu, but Uematsu sounds committed to coming back only when he's ready. Do not worry, quote. Once I've made a full recovery, I'll be back to doing what I do best. So, I hope that he is not, I hope it is just fatigue and overwork and that he is fine and will be back eventually. And I hope it's nothing more serious than that. But yeah, I think he deserves some rest. He's pretty good at what he does. I think he deserves to go take a nap.
Yeah, I think that. I think he's earned some R&R. And is it Nobu or Nobuo? I assume it's Nobu.
No, I'm not sure. I don't speak Japanese.
Well, yeah. But either way, good luck, Nobu. Probably Nobu. Good luck.
Yeah.
Out there. We hope to see you again soon. You're a great, really good composer. Good.
Really good composer. Yeah. Yeah. And I thought this was interesting. He's been working at Square since 1985. So pretty crazy. Been there a long time. And then he left to do his own studio. Or he what was that studio called that they made Blue Dragon? Shit, I forgot the name of it. But he worked on like Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey, I think was the game. But yeah, so good job, dude. Let's go take a nap.
Oh yeah. Blue Dragon developed my Mistwalker.
Mistwalker, yes.
And
those were Mistwalker Studios. I think they've closed down now, but they were former Square employees, like some big names. People that made Final Fantasy were like, "Oh, screw you guys, we're gonna go make our own game," and they did.
And they did.
Yep.
All right. So let's try and blitz through our last story, and then we'll be finished by and large. China doesn't like Twitch. So apparently the Chinese government has just shut down Twitch in their country, sort of all of a sudden. The live stream platform Twitch is no longer available in China after a surge in popularity last month among esports fans. This week, the Twitch app was abruptly removed from the iOS App Store in China, leaving fans in the lurch. This is from an article in Polygon. Twitch has confirmed to Polygon that it is aware of the situation. Yeah, I'd hope they would be.
I would hope so.
We've reached out for further comment specifically with regard to what communications it has had with the Chinese government, but they have not been very forthcoming. Right now, we don't know too much about why, but it's a huge bummer. I assume that this has to do with China's sort of ridiculous need to censor everything.
Yes.
And it's like in recent years, we've talked about it at length in previous episodes. China is, allowing consoles into their country. They're allowing other games. Now they're allowing streaming platforms, which sort of get the word out about different games. And I think also Twitch is probably, it makes sense that it would be on the censorship block, because the whole point of Twitch is not that you're seeing the games, as we discussed earlier with Tyler, known misogynist, David Levins. The whole point is that you are getting to know the person who is streaming the game.
Yes.
And if the person who's streaming that game has opinions that the government does not like, you're
That the
getting
Ministry of Culture does
Yeah.
not approve of.
you're getting someone who is becoming massively popular in celebrity that has not politically correct views in the eyes of the Chinese government. So I think that's probably what they're worried about. That the government finally made the realization that Twitch isn't actually about watching video games; it's about watching people.
Yes, people from around the world. And yeah, that's not line up. If that doesn't line up with your political and sociological views, then that's bad. The populace is going to rebel. You're going to have a peasant revolt on your hands. Yeah, they do mention in this story that the Chinese government, they require games developed outside the country to be modified pretty regularly. Of course, you can't have any skeletons. It's too spoopy for China. The government state of affairs goes much deeper. The current state of affairs goes much deeper. In an official statement translated by the Washington Post and other outlets, governmental regulators claim that they are endeavoring to protect teenagers' eyesight. That's why they're doing it.
Sure.
To protect teenagers' eyesight.
That's definitely the reason.
Yeah, those poor teenagers, their eyes are going to burn out. Some analysts, however, suggest that the issues are more generational, with the older members of the Chinese government seeking to crack down on what they perceive as a rise in gambling and addiction.
Loot
Interesting.
boxes. They just hate loot boxes. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is for a force of good. Maybe this is what'll turn everything around. Yeah, this has been happening. So recently, we also had problems with Tencent. Their market share dropped dramatically. Tencent is a huge mega corporation that has its fingers in a lot of gaming pie, and they've stopped letting a lot of games come into the country for reasons kind of unknown. And they mention here that Monster Hunter, when that came out, its license was revoked. With NetEase stock prices were also down last month. Yeah, so like Monster Hunter came out, and then really quickly the government was like, nope, you can't have Monster Hunter here, which was huge because Monster Hunter was riding a wave, and then China was like, no sir, no Monster Hunting. So yeah, China's being weird about video games. Who knows why?
Shame on you, Chinese government. Shame on you, communism. Listen, I don't like capitalism, but I don't like communism either.
Yeah, and they're not. I mean, they're communist and they like their money. They like their money a lot too. They like making lots and lots and lots of cash.
So
see what happens in China.
Yeah, I'm curious as to how this sort of this story of China letting in all these video games over the course of like the last couple of years has actually been really interesting to watch, and I'm always interested to see sort of the new updates in that ongoing sort of thing.
Yeah, and especially it has an air of mystery to it because they're a very tightly lipped government, and there's also the language barrier. So when they say things like, "Oh yeah, it's to protect teenagers' eyesight," you're like, "No, like you're doing. There's something going on here. Like there's some weird shit going on here."
Well, that's all of our stories. We got through all of them. Now, let's talk about those games, boy. So we had Undertale came out on the Switch on the 18th. Yeah, all the
Huzzah.
Steins Gate games.
Jesus, there's so many. I've never understood that. Like, it's crazy.
We had the Banner Saga.
My favorite Steins Gate game, of course, is linear bounded Phenogram.
Obviously. Duh.
It's the best.
Yeah. We had the Banner Saga trilogy come out on the Switch. Pretty good. Good for them getting out on the Switch. Love that game.
Yeah.
And let's see, coming up, the Banner Saga's today, by the way. Coming up, we have games such as Moonlighter coming out on the Switch. Very excited for that. Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is the sort of, basically Path of Exile came out, or not Path of Exile, Pillars of Eternity came out, and a bunch of game companies were like, oh my gosh, people like top-down RPGs again, and then the people who make the pen and paper role-playing game Pathfinder were like, let's make one, and they're way too late to the party, but they're making one. It's coming out the 25th.
In an inverse of that, the makers of Pillars of Eternity are making a tabletop version of that game system.
Strange. Very strange. We have they're porting South Park: The Stick of Truth. That's also coming over to the Switch. Basically, This is just a bunch of Switch releases.
It always is.
Yeah. trying to flesh out that catalog. The
We have
Walking
Cyvarior Delta.
Oh my gosh, The Walking Dead, the final season, episode 2. So is
The,
that not coming out? Is because it was scheduled for the 25th.
I think they said after the. I think this episode's the last one. They're
Ah.
they're not gonna finish it, which is really sad because
Yeah.
I'd like to see how it ended. But they got 30 minutes to get out of there. They're blowing up the building apparently.
Blowing up the building.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll get some other like company to finish that or something. Like, yeah, I don't know. Crazy.
Life is Strange 2, episode 1, coming out on the 27th. Yeah.
More episodic adventure games.
Super Neptunia RPG coming out on the 27th
right.
as well. That just sounds cool. And then on the 28th, we've got Dragon Ball Fighters on the Switch. I'm really happy that they're porting that. I was worried that they might not.
I thought it was already on the Switch.
No, Dragon Ball Xenoverse was already on the Switch.
Right. That was like the Deviant Art online thing, right?
Yes, where you can make your own Dragon Ball Sona.
Yeah, Dragon Ball Sona. Nice.
So, we're going to end on time. We start on time, we're going to end on time. I got 10 seconds. We're not going to end on time. So, if thank you so much for watching or listening. This has been Don't Copy That Floppy, a video game news podcast / vodcast, broadcasting live Fridays, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on twitch.tv / DCTF podcast. If you want to listen to past episodes of the show, or watch past episodes of the show, there's great ways to do that, such as going to our lovely benefactor, chipbit.net, where we have a show archive. You can also check out other podcasts on that site, or you could go to and find us on iTunes just by searching Don't Copy That Floppy. You can listen on there, subscribe on there, and you can also leave us a rating and review. We'd appreciate it. Or you can go to our YouTube page and watch the Twitch stream archive, basically, of all those episodes. You can see all the articles we're looking at. The other great way to support the show is you can go over to our Patreon and pledge to give us some money every month, and you get access to sweet, sweet bonus content. We just had some come out about Dan and my retrospective on the Switch, and we have some coming out today, actually. That's Dan and my retrospective on movies from 2018, what we saw, what we were interested in, what we thought was cool, and movies that are coming up for the end of the year and what we were looking forward to. So,
what was your favorite movie of 2018?
Oh, my favorite movie of 2018 hasn't come out yet.
Oh,
Because I've pre-decided my favorite movie of 2018 is going to be the Spider-Verse movie that comes out in December.
that's true. That's very true.
That movie looks so good. But so. Oh, it's all Spoderman.
That's Spoderman.
Thanks so much for listening. Once again, we appreciate you. And until next time, Chris, what do people have to remember?
To listen to the noted anti-capitalist and anti-communist podcasts, Don't Copy That Floppy.